Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Chrissy B Show. Now, the new year for many people is the start of something fresh, something new, and people really look forward to it. However, for others, it's something really, really painful because it's the sign of something that's actually come to an end. And we're going to be speaking about divorce today, and especially divorce from a man's point of view, because they feel it just as much and sometimes more than the ladies as well. And I'll be speaking to two gentlemen who have been through divorce, how they coped, but how also they came out on the other side. And we also have a regular guest with us, Keren Smedley, tonight, who's going to be giving her input as well. But first of all, we have the news with Rihanna. Hello, Rihanna.
Hi, Chrissy.
How are you?
I'm good.
Over your flu?
No, not really. It's been attacking me for 2 weeks. I really don't know what's going on. I'm taking all the Vit-Cs that I can, but I still feel kind of blah.
Okay, but you're right to do the show today, I hope.
Yeah, I power through it.
All right, so let's go then. What did you have in the news for us?
Well, something interesting that I came across about Christmas, because as you know, in the UK, I know Christmas is gone now, but Britons tend to make such a big deal about it. They prepare 2 months in advance. And
well, some of the adverts are like 6 months.
I know, it's insane. It's like straight after Easter or whatever it is that comes, then they start advertising for Christmas. And it makes it really, really, what's the word? You have no choice but to start saving for Christmas and just start powering through. So Britons spend £150 more than anyone else in Europe.
Really?
So I don't know if it's a generous thing or a reckless thing. I mean, the Christmas decorations, they are by large the most exotic and flamboyant in the whole of Europe. Have you seen Oxford Street and everything that they do, all the lights?
Yeah. Oh, I love the lights in Oxford Street.
Nice,
I do love them.
It's such a big deal.
Yeah.
It really is.
People go to Oxford Street just to see the lights sometimes.
I know.
Don't they?
I've always wanted to go, but the crowd's too big, and then I'm too short, and can't really get to the front. But I would like to be there. They make such a big deal of the light. Yeah, I would love to go. I'll put it on my calendar. Just wait 11 months.
I don't understand why people do spend so much. Like, for example, okay, I understand gifts and everything, but decorations. When in my house, we used to use the same decorations
every
year in, year out. Had the same angel to put on top of the tree. Same.
But every year you want to outdo
and the same
yourself.
Tree, the same tree as well.
Every year you want to outdo yourself.
No, not really.
Every year people want to just, go get that extra light, have that extra fancy, I don't know, colour, go for that bright pink because you had the green last year. It's a bit different, isn't it?
Well, if everyone's smart, they'll start saving from now.
From now.
So they don't get into debt.
Men spend more on gifts than women.
Do they?
Yeah.
That's surprising.
But it's only £3 more, so it's not that much of a difference, but that was good. We'll look forward to this year's Christmas. Hopefully men won't spend that much more than women.
Okay.
Next on the list, well, normally people say opposites attract, which is true to a certain extent, but according to eHarmony, they only, opposites do attract, but not in a long-term relationship because the differences start to outweigh the similarities.
Well, it depends what kind of areas we're talking about.
It depends on the differences, but they said that having similarities is best because the relationship will go on for ages. Whereas when opposites attract, they're excited because, the other person's nothing like them. They're completely different. So you're intrigued, you're excited because they have this wow factor. But then after a while, it's like the wow factor becomes the separation factor. So it doesn't go on for that long. So
I think it depends on how much you're willing to sacrifice in it. Because the thing is, like, for example, with me and my husband, we're similar in a lot of ways in the sort of terms of our age, things that we grew up with, TV programs that we watch, all those kind of things. But we're from two sort of different cultures, and we've had to adjust to each other. Yeah. But I think we could have allowed it to become a problem, but because we're both willing to give in here and there, it's worked, and it's going to keep working. Because so we're really close. So, but I think for others, it's hard. You have to really be willing to make those sacrifices.
You have to make the similarities to outweigh any difference. Because there will always be differences in all relationships. Exactly. Yeah. But if the similarities outweigh, even if it's 3, 4 out of 10, but you can make that 3, 4 bigger than the other 6, and it will make it, a smashing relationship. So thank you, eHarmony, but, not this time around. But also, did you know that not just when you wake up in the morning, you have, fire coming out of your mouth because you've got morning breath, but there are other things.
I just never know what she's going to say in this program.
I think it makes it, you just picture me saying it and the image pops up in your mind like fire coming out of your mouth.
Okay.
Sorry, a me moment there. But yeah, there are certain things that make your breath smell bad, even if, you know, you've had that scampi or, you know, the garlic, but then even without it, your breath will still smell bad. Things like medication. Medication will make your breath kick off at any moment. I don't know, it's scientific words that I can't really pronounce, but it does make your breath smell bad. And there's also mouth breathing. You know, sometimes people sleep with their mouth open. I don't know how people do that, but some do.
Because they've got the bunged up.
Is it the sinus or something? Yeah, that.
I think if people are overweight as well, it contributes.
Yeah, that's in there as well. It, like, I don't know, something to do with the immune or enzymes, I think it is. That
Don't go into that.
But you know, I found that quite interesting, because I only thought, okay, if you have, like, what do you call those, fillings and things inside your mouth that would make your breath smell bad, the usual things. But I didn't think things like medication that's supposed to help you. How can that, like, work against you?
No, I'm not a doctor, but I think that's a topic for our Top to Toe Friday.
It should be.
Yeah. We have had a dentist on before, actually, so
wow.
we can
I need to see a dentist. I really don't like going to dentists, I'll tell you that for free. Oh gosh, let's not talk about it. Last time I went, they extracted a tooth, so
when was the last time you went, Rihanna?
Very early last year.
Oh, that's not tough. I thought she was going to say like 5 years or something.
No, but because for anything, even if they have to do a polish, they have to put me to sleep.
Really? Oh.
I'm very sensitive. I just start to, like, gush out. They have to put me to sleep because it's too much for them to handle. Oh. And I don't want them to use the injection because I have to fight them off, even if it's the butterfly needles. But okay. That's just me. What do you think about technology, Chris?
Oh, that's a bit of a big question.
Do you think technology is helping, or
it depends how you use it?
What if you use it for everything? Because Google, remember the time we had Ask Jeeves? And you asked Jeeves everything. How do you cook eggs?
I never really used that. I didn't find it very
weird. It disappeared when Google came back. I can't even remember when Google came, but it just went shh. So now technology is just used for everything. It's very rare for people to actually sit down and read books. Unless you're a book lover, then you'll go take a thesaurus, a dictionary, try to find out certain things, read a book. But now technology is used for everything. It's very hard for people to remember something without Googling it or going on the internet for something.
Well, I still use a diary, a day to write my to-do list. I tried it on the iPad and my phone. I just don't do it. I just like, there's something about crossing things off and writing them.
It makes it exciting. It makes it like you're achieving something. I'm ticking it off my list and not just erasing
it
from
I don't
my
like
iPad.
reading. I don't like reading things like newspapers and stuff from the internet. I like to actually have the physical paper with me.
There's something about reading from paper that makes it fun and exciting.
Yeah,
I got a book, which I haven't started yet, but I will do. It's called The Woman Who Slept for a Year.
A book you're reading?
Yeah. Well, I haven't started, but I heard that and I was like, ooh, that sounds exciting. And I had a choice. I could either buy it on Amazon so I could have it on the tablet, or like just physically buy the book. And I chose to buy the book because it makes it better. I don't want to lose the whole gist of the old-fashioned way of reading.
I know, me too.
I mean, we love technology and everything, but we don't want it to take away.
So this is what I see. I have my iPad, but I also have the script on here in case this conks out.
Yeah, because you know, it's like your own hard drive, not the computer hard drive, but your own paper hard drive, which is lovely. So technology, we do love you, but don't take everything away from us. But yeah. That's all I have for today.
Rihanna, thank you so much.
Thank you, Chrissy.
And I do hope you get better soon. We've been saying that for a couple of weeks now. You haven't been to the doctor, young lady?
No, I haven't.
There you go.
But there is a remedy. I was told by two lovely ladies today that if I mix broccoli, carrots, apples and oranges and have it twice a day, it should knock this right out of me.
Okay.
I'm going to try it because I do love broccoli. So
all right, I want to be close to you. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Chrissy.
Rihanna. And after the break, we're going to be joined by our guest to talk about divorce and how to also get over those emotions if you have broken up with someone and maybe it was a long-term relationship. What can you do to move on? Maybe at the moment you're feeling really stuck. You're thinking, oh my gosh, there's no way I'm ever going to feel happiness again. I'm never going to maybe look forward to a new relationship. Well, actually, we have two guests here to prove that you can move on and be happy again. So do join us after this.
Don't forget to subscribe to the Chrissy B Show, always aiming to show you the happier side of life. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter.
Welcome back to the show, and I'd like to introduce my first guest, and they are Keren Smedley, who's a love expert and also career expert, aren't you, Keren? And also we have Gerard Smith, who's been through a divorce quite recently.
That's correct,
haven't you?
yeah.
Okay, so we're going to be speaking to you first, Gerard, about what you went through, because you're a very happy person. I can see now, we're smiling, and everything, cracking a lot of jokes in the green room before. We did have a laugh, but you've been through quite a bit, haven't you?
Oh,
with
absolutely.
Your divorce. What happened?
Absolutely. Well, in a nutshell, I was happily married for 17 years. Met
17 years, a long time.
Long years. Met my wife in Switzerland on the ski slopes. Everything was wonderful, fun. 3 children later, we unfortunately had to get a divorce. So
when did things actually start to go wrong, though?
Probably, she had her career, I had my career. We were both, passing each other as couples do when they're very busy with their careers and with children. And then things, probably about after 12 years and directly after the 3rd child, things took a turn for the worse. I stopped working as a director, and then she took a few years off from her career, and then we found ourselves in the same spot, in the same place, and then we got to know each other again, and it wasn't really a good thing.
So would you say, are you saying then you didn't really know each other that well before?
Well, we did, and we had a couple years old, together without the children, and we lived together for a year, cohabitated. Things worked out well, but after children, and then she hid a few things from me that I didn't know, and these things came to light after the years of being in the relationship. And then, things just sort of came to a head after that. And unfortunately, we stopped sleeping in the same bed. She would have the kids there. I would go up to the guest room after work.
What did you try to do to resolve the issues that you were having?
I actually suggested to go to marriage counseling, and she refused to go to marriage counseling. Yeah, unfortunately, she wasn't open to that. So it just got worse from there, and she didn't see that there was any problem in the relationship. And then,
but you could really see the problems, but she couldn't.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, there was no hitting or anything, but there were, it started to become more argumentative, and then a lot of times, people say the guys don't talk, but she was the one that refused to speak or communicate with me.
That's quite unusual, Keren, because I think from what I've heard from other people, normally the females would want to definitely I'd love to go for counselling, and sometimes it's the men that say, look, I don't want anyone to know our business. And how come, what do you think
Without doubt, very often the women are actually pushing for the conversation and for having more of a conversation.
It's unusual.
But what's so interesting is that we tend to divide into this gender divide as though it is always like that. And it's actually to do with people. And some people want to talk about their emotions and want to discuss it and find a way through, and others, for a number of reasons, just don't. Very often because they're frightened. They're actually frightened about what's going to come out of it, and feel that if we keep quiet and we just sort of ignore this, it will go away.
I think she's absolutely right there, because I think I used to stop on my bicycle coming home and just used to stand out in the field or go down to Brighton, down to the beach, and just sit there and just try to figure out in my head what was going on. But then just as you mentioned there, that she, I think, somehow just didn't want to realize that there was a problem and just wanted it to go away.
That she was
and
like a
that sort of just sort of a defense mechanism and that type of thing. So
but she also had a condition, didn't she?
Yeah, she had a condition, diagnosis, narcissistic personality disorder.
Can you explain to our viewers what that is?
Yeah, NPD is I mean, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I've been to a few of them, and basically what it is that narcissism, it's more than a word. I thought it was just a word at the beginning, but it's more of a personality disorder where you have to control everything at all times. It's more than just being a control freak. It's a real personality disorder, and you can't negotiate with a person with NPD. You have to.
That must have been so frustrating for you.
And it still is now, even after that. It's just there's nothing you can do, and you know, that person, whether it's a male or a female, has to have the absolute last word in the relationship. And I think because of me, because of my personality type, I just accepted it all these years. But as we're going through the divorce, which took 2.5 years, I just looked back at all of the different events, many of them very clear, but I just sort of brushed them aside as just, you know, just relationship type of things. So I think, you know, every divorce, you know, has different elements to it that's quite unique. So I just can just say, try to be positive. I mean, there were so many times, I mean, I've gone hiking through the snow after, you know, during the divorce when I signed over the house to my ex and the kids. And,
how did you feel when it actually did come to a head and you both decided, okay, that's it now? What was that? Those feelings like, because it was a long time, 17 years.
Yeah, 17 years. You feel like you've done something wrong. Correctly, you feel guilty to an extent. You feel like if you have children, not everyone does in divorce, that you've let them down. And I myself, I mean, I was maybe just, you know, trying to work through it and to make it work. You know, that type of thing. So yeah, you just feel sort of let down. You feel, I mean, the emotions span the whole spectrum, really. Anger with yourself, not so much with your spouse. You know,
so you weren't like sort of blaming her, rather you were looking at yourself more.
Yeah, but once I figured out there was a real thing and it wasn't just my imagination, then I could put my finger on it and say, that's the reason. Because I used to just figure for years, just try to figure out what is wrong. There's something wrong. It's still going. But a lot of couples, I think, even though they're married today, they just let it go. They just continue. I remember reading an article in the paper about that, and just, you know, there was a guy who was 65 years old, and he came to the realization that his wife had a narcissistic personality disorder. But unfortunately, everything was so set in stone. They were married 35 years that he was either too afraid, I forget what it was, too old to really to change it. I mean, everything was all together. I mean, he couldn't imagine living his life without that person. So
it's just strange that you went for 12 years though without sort of it really being a problem. It's only sort of when you spent that time together again that
I knew that if it didn't change, and people would come to me and they would say, yeah, I feel sorry for you, you know, that you could see that you're not happy in your relationship. So you know, I thought to myself, you know, either because it was me, that I was the one that said, look, we have to, you know, get divorced. I was the one that actually said that, and I actually took the ring off and said, look, this is it. And then I went to the lawyers after that. I said, look, we have to stop this, because she won't communicate. It's just dead end there.
That's the thing. Obviously I do believe that most couples can get help if both of them are willing to actually go for counselling and get that help. But it's not really much you can do if one of the parties doesn't want any help.
And there was no physical contact anymore. I mean, it was like 6 years since we had any sex. I mean, a lot of that has to do with kids. A lot of times women lose any type of physical attraction for a man because
6 years is a long time.
Yeah, so I figured, you know, people, you know, find out, it's like, look, I mean, that's nothing. I've heard a friend of mine said 13 years.
Oh my God.
But anyway, the message is for me is to try to overcome that. I mean, there were times where, you know, I'd wake up in cold sweat and I'd have to change my t-shirt and then just go for walks in the middle of the night.
During the divorce?
Before, during, and after.
Wow.
And just, you know, not being able to eat properly. I'm not a big drinker, so I never did, you know, a lot of drinking or drugs, you know, type A drugs or anything like that. Some people do. That's their out. I'm an athlete, so, you know, my wife is also very competitive. My ex-wife is also very competitive. She played, you know, semi-pro basketball, that type of thing. So, I exercise. That's what I do. And that's how I sort of came over it, doing that. Just you know, anything I could do that, you know, my sports. So that's how I overcame it, and just sort of trying to think positive too.
Is that what you normally hear, Keren? Like how people sort of try and cope with loss, whether it be divorce or
yes, I think people try and cope in different ways. I think it was interesting when you were talking about feeling guilty, and I think that we go into a marriage, you know, wanting it to work and assuming it will work, and then coming away feeling I failed and I did something wrong. And one of the things about the recovery is actually to be able to separate out this relationship didn't work for whatever reason, but it isn't because I'm a useless, hopeless failure myself. And really important in order to be able to begin to see who you are and your own identity. If you've been married 17 years, or like this guy at 65, 35 years, your identity is really with that person and in that relationship. And then if you're not in that relationship, who am I? And how do I re-find who I am myself is really important.
Absolutely, it's a redefining moment. Absolutely. And for me also, I remember standing there just thinking, bright sunny Sunday morning, I said, okay, look, I've got, I'm 50 years old, I've got the rest of my life ahead of me, don't crash and burn here. You're halfway through, hopefully, if I'm fortunate enough to make another 50 years like Nelson Mandela. But anyway, you read those stories, and I think if you take someone else's story and say, wow, that person, they locked someone up for 27 years of their life, and they can move forward. I think you need to see it all in perspective. I think you have to see it in perspective. There's people out there that have lost everything, that have buried 3 or 4 kids. My mother's friends have done that. Lost a drugs and gang warfare in Detroit, Michigan. These things happen. So you just try to go forward and move forward with your life. Yeah.
Now, a bit later on, we'll be speaking obviously about how to recover from this as well, because like I said, there are probably people watching now that are thinking, this life is over for me now. I'm hurting so much. I can't imagine this pain ever going away, but it does eventually. So we'll be speaking about things maybe that you can do. And like you said something there very, very important about sort of putting things into perspective, because that's so true, because 27 years in jail, that's a whole lifetime for some people. So we'll be speaking more about that. And we'll also be joined after the break by Ian Pelham Turner, who also had an experience with divorce, and he's going to be telling us all about it. So do stay tuned.
Don't forget to subscribe to the Chrissy B Show, always aiming to show you the happier side of life. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter.
Welcome back to the show. Now I'm joined by Ian Pelham Turner. Hello, welcome back.
Thank you so much.
You've been on our show recently because you're a raw photographer, aren't you?
I am a raw photographer as well.
Okay, but you've had your own experience with divorce.
I did, indeed.
Gosh, what was that like? How long were you married?
First of all, I just wanted to repeat the message you were saying earlier. The reality is you can get through this. Look at me now. I'm like the phoenix, that's come out of the flames. 10 years ago, when I went through probably the worst time of my life, I'd had 50 years of happiness.
50 years you were married?
No, I was married 30 years. But
yeah.
I'd had a great childhood, thought I had a great marriage, and then one day my former wife came home and said, do you want a divorce?
So just out of the blue like that? So everything was fine before?
Yep.
No signs at all?
No signs. Just one day, that was it.
So you married 30 years. You knew each other, you were telling me earlier, for 30
We knew each other for 3 years before that as well.
So you got on well in general?
Yeah. It's one of those things in life. And so for me, it was probably one of the most telling times of my life as well. All of a sudden, I went from hero to zero. It took me 2 years and all the pain in the world. I didn't stop crying every day for 3 years.
Gosh.
When it first happened. But you get through this period. And I think the thing that really I always will find is communication. Talk about it. And that's what I would say to any man these days, is let your feelings out. Be able to talk about these things as well.
But let's go back to when you first, your wife came home and just broke that news to you. What was your initial reaction?
My initial reaction, I went on my knees and begged her not to. And I did that right in the middle of the road.
Gosh.
So that's how hard it hit me. And the very first night when she finally left, the only thing that I can remember that night was I made a promise to myself I wouldn't go to drink. Crazy, I wasn't.
Were you afraid of doing something like getting out of control?
Because I'd seen so many things like it before. And at that time, I was working for the Daily Mail. And they were fabulous. The Daily Mail gets a lot of bad hits at times, but when they were with me, and when I was working for them, they were absolutely tremendous to actually be so supportive towards me as well. And I think what happened was that for the first 6 months, I was banging my head against 4 empty walls. I would wake up in the morning, I'd be shaking. I'd actually physically shake.
You mentioned that you were shaking as
Oh
well,
yeah,
didn't you?
absolutely. Just uncontrollable shaking and just dreams and taking off a completely wet T-shirt and. But those are the physical things.
It's like shock, isn't it? It's like being in shock.
It's like shock. I mean, I went down 2 suit sizes in the first month.
Wow.
You know, and for absolute probably 3 to 6 months, I lived on toast and chocolate.
Oh gosh.
It was, I'm a chocoholic anyway, but it got me through, Chrissy, it got me through. You know, Cadbury's really made a fortune out of me at that time, and toast I love as well. But I think the reality was that it took me a long time to actually, first of all, recognise this was happening. I was in total shock. I think I was in total depression as well. No two ways about it. You know, and you know, I'd go out in the mornings. I'd go and do my assignments for the day for the Daily Mail. I'd come back in. And
how did it affect your work though? Because it must have taken its toll.
I think because I love my work, I could actually switch off.
Okay.
So it was sort of fabulous. But at night time, I'd come back. And obviously I'd had to sort of send over my images to the Daily Mail. And I'd rush in at night, and the first thing I would do is close all the curtains. I wanted to close the world off. So
it's like you were frightened to be alone.
Oh, I was frightened to be alone. You know, I mean, and I went through all the emotions. You know, I used to have this recurring dream of being on my deathbed on my own. And it was the most frightening thing to actually do. You know, and I kept on sort of dreaming about being in my coffin, and all I could hear was the vicar's footsteps walking up the church because there was no one else there.
Oh, bless.
You know, so there's this whole emotion going through that would I be on my own for the rest of my life? Reality is no, you're not. You know, and the big reality is what really helped me was womanhood. You know, I had a great circle of female friends who circled me in love. And they sort of took me through that sort of period of my life that was very, very hard for me. And that's why these days I embrace womanhood. And I know what womanhood is. I know what friendships are, and real friendships are as well. And I think for any man going through this thing, you know, I think it hits men probably more than it hits women.
So that's quite interesting, because I didn't think it would hit them more, but from what you're saying now, it's quite shocking what you went through, both of you went through, especially with the shaking and those things that were going through your mind. That's pretty bad. But there's something that happened afterwards as well, because you were telling me before.
Oh, I mean,
afterwards you went into different relationships.
Yeah, I mean, but basically, for the first 6 months, I didn't want to know anything. So, you know, the only television programs I could watch were news programs. I didn't want to watch anything with emotions attached to it at all, because I'd just dissolve into tears yet again. It just reminded me of what I'd just suddenly lost. And then one night, the local paper dropped through the door, and it opened up at the ads, you know, for Lonely Hearts. So I thought, well, I'll go down that sort of path. Now, by that time, I hadn't been dating for about 33, 34 years.
Gosh.
You know, so you can imagine, things have moved on. And in the end, I ended up with 6 girlfriends.
Gosh.
And they were in each county dotted around the M25.
How did you manage that, by the way? Just as a
it took a lot of glucose.
More chocolate?
And chocolate. I had a lot of chocolate, even more than I had before.
But you weren't happy, because some people watching that, especially the guys, might be thinking, yeah, 6 women on the go, that's great. Were you actually happy doing that?
No, I felt miserable. Was the reality, because I was actually using them, and that's not me at all. And I think it's quite right by what you were saying about how men have to find themselves again, how they have to really understand who they are. And I think the biggest thing in my life is I've now found myself. I love myself for who I am. I'm not the most perfect person in this world, but I understand who I am. I understand what motivates me. I understand what makes me happy. And I focus in on it.
You're a whole person on your own now, rather than sort of maybe you felt whole just if you were together with your wife.
I think the biggest change in my life was, for the first time in my life, I had to focus in on myself. Whereas most of my life I'd been the rock for other people, you know, as a high earner. So if anybody had sort of emotional problems, financial problems, I was the one they came to. And all of a sudden, it would turn around the other way, where I became the needy one. I became the one that actually needed the rocks around me. And I was very fortunate that Helena Sharp, my business partner, you know, I met her just at the right time. And being partly Greek, you know, she stood no nonsense from me at all. And in the end, you know, I really saw through her, first of all. She gave me the strength to think, go and do and find yourself, be who you are. And I think that's the secret, is to let out the pain, first of all. You know, and it took me a long time to let out the pain. I still cry. You know, there are times when I sort of, you know,
remember things. And
you know, emotions come back. But now, it's milliseconds. Because
you
now,
pull yourself together quite.
Because now I know what a great future I'm having, what a great time I'm having right now, the amount of wonderful friends, real friendships that I have as well. And I think that's the secret. You know, men need to communicate more. They really do. They need to let it out. I was listening to this radio program, and this presenter talk show was saying that he thought for an hour he was going to have silence on his show, because the segment of the show was that men don't communicate in divorce. So he thought,
no one's going to
no one's going to talk to him. No one's going to talk to him. And then the reality was the switchboard lit up. You know, and there was one guy came on and said,
do you think men think it's a sign of weakness if they talk about their emotions? I don't know if you can help with that as well, Keren, because obviously they do want to talk, and maybe, I don't know, because it was radio, maybe they thought, oh, you know, maybe it's easy to do it because no one knows who I am. But do you think generally that they might find it more difficult than women?
I think they're less used to it, and also they may see it as a weakness. And therefore, when someone gives them a license, like we want to hear from men, they're actually thinking, yes, someone wants to hear me and wants to hear about it. Because if you've been brought up to feel that you should be, as you use,
that's
the rock and the strong one.
That's drummed into men from little boys. Absolutely. Don't cry, you're not supposed to show your emotions, you're not supposed to talk about things. So.
And less so now than it was when you were young, when it was very much that feeling of that's what you're meant to do. So from 3, you know, don't cry because you're a little boy and you're not supposed to do that. So it then feels bad that you've actually done that. So you also are out of habit and also believe that no one's interested. And men, when they get together, my understanding is, because obviously not being a man I don't really know, but I think I know, but men go out and they talk about activities and what they're doing rather than how they're feeling very often.
Keren, hold that thought, because that's really interesting. I'd like to hear more about that. We're going to go to a quick break. Okay. Please don't forget what you're saying, because it's really, really important. And afterwards, we're going to speak about recovery after divorce, especially for men. So do join us after this.
Don't forget to subscribe to the Chrissy B Show, always aiming to show you the happier side of life. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter.
Welcome back. So we've heard 2 very moving stories here today, but also we're going to be showing you the other side of how both these gentlemen recovered and are happy today and moving on with their lives. But Keren, you were speaking about something before the break that was very important. Can you continue with that?
Yes, that men and young boys tend to talk to each other about what they're doing. And they'll talk about their activities and they'll do things together, or they'll go to the pub and they'll talk about football. They don't talk about how they feel.
Yeah.
And women tend to talk about how they feel. There were some experiments done many years ago of putting groups of girls together and groups of boys together. And the girls, after half an hour, knew about each other's families and how many siblings they had and what their parents did, and the boys had built Great Meccano something but knew nothing about each other, not even their names, and it sort of goes on. And then what happens is we get into relationship, and people who have managed lives in their single-sex groups very differently then come together and wonder why there's a difficulty. And we should actually be taught how do you learn to talk to each other? So, certainly, you know, there were more, you know, when you and I were young than there are now, but of single-sex schools. So a co-ed school at least enables children to get used to talking to people who aren't lovers. Otherwise, the only people you actually learn how to talk to the opposite sex are people that you actually fancy, or then have a sexual relationship, rather than just having an ordinary relationship,
I agree.
which is really important. And so, you know, working at a relationship is really important. And I was just sort of struck listening to the two of you about the difference in your divorce, or how you got there. And, you know, for you it was actually something that built up over a number of years, and yours was a real shock.
Yeah, that
and
was
like a bereavement, and actually going through that grief process, which we all have to go through when we lose something, is really painful. And one of the things, you know, you managed to do this with your friends, but it's also really important for people to think, I don't need to do this on my own. There are lots of people that I can
because you were fortunate because you had people around you, but for someone that doesn't, Keren,
I think you're exactly right, because I think, you know, I at the time when it was all happening, I could only open my emotions up to one man, but to women, you were perfectly right. I was very lucky that all my life I've grown up around women. So I went to a co-educational school as well. So I don't see women as us and them.
Sure.
I just see them as nice people, you know, as well. And so, you know, I found that, and even today when I have an emotion, you know, I can call up one of my lady friends and we can just talk it through. And they actually thank me, because the same thing happened to me a few days ago. You know, I was talking about an emotion. You know, I have down days still. You know, and you've really got to sort of pull yourself out of them. And I was talking to one of my friends, and she was suffering from exactly the same thing.
Right. So you could talk about
and so we could talk about it together, and we both thanked each other at the end of it. And I think that the biggest thing for men is to be able to communicate, just let it out. If they can let it out, then I found that was the first step to recovery.
Definitely. Gerald, did you do that? Did you open up to someone and talk about
well, I was a member of, as I mentioned, I did sports, so I was a member of a swim club.
Right.
And so we had gone, it's funny you mentioned that as well, we had gone to Normandy, France with 5 guys, and one of the guys was like a paratrooper who jumped out, you know, 20 airplanes, 200 times, you know, a couple of real, you know, military guys. And like you said, we talked about, you know, our activities, how many times, you know, you jumped out of an airplane with your, you know, with your, you know, stuff. But yeah, that's how I sort of worked through things out. Yeah. Just being with the guys and talking with the guys. And I had also women friends as well. Yeah, no,
about that, you've now moved on, you have a relationship.
I do.
Okay. So you haven't been sort of put off by what happened?
No, a lot of people did ask me that. I stayed single for about a year. And then after I met a nice woman, but that didn't work out for other reasons. She ended up being bisexual. But now I'm in a very, very healthy relationship with a normal person, and the marriage topic has come up a few times. So
okay.
Yeah.
So you're not sort of running away from it?
No, and no, absolutely not. No. I am more cautious though.
Okay.
I think I'm not paranoid, but I am more cautious. And, you know, in terms of, you know, the mind games, that type of thing. I mean, my last partner that I was married to for 17 years, we were very, you know, similar in a lot of ways. He was an athlete, I was an athlete. We like to do outdoor things. We were very active, you know. The only real difference, I was Catholic, she was Protestant, and then that sort of started some friction. Whereas now my partner is also Catholic, and that was a problem.
So you're more careful. But actually going through the divorce and recovering from it, what tips would you give to maybe the viewers tonight that are going through it, or they've recently gone through it, or even it might have been a long time ago, but they're still stuck in those emotions? What would you say to them that will show them actually there is life after divorce?
Yeah, I would say the same as you. Just sort of, there is light at the end of the tunnel. You're just part of the way through your journey. And there's a very exciting and a very positive light forward.
Yeah. Okay. And how about you, Ian? What would you say?
I think the reality is men want the dream just as much as women. They want the fairy tale. And when they lose the fairy tale, I think you're quite right. It takes men a lot longer to actually trust women again, or trust anything again. trust their senses again. I think the thing that I really learnt in my very early days was listen to myself, and I'd never had to do that before. Because I had to look after everyone else, my needs I just put to the back. And so to actually listen to myself was very, very new for me. And I was terrible at the start. Neurosis was a byword in my lifestyle. I'd make a decision one day and I'd change the decision the following day. My friends used to wonder what was going on in my life. But I think through listening to myself, through finding out who I was, what was the part of it, let out the pain, cry. Yeah. It's a great relief. Start, isn't it? It's a great relief. And then go and talk to people. People will talk to you. I mean, the thing I found, sometimes you get too much advice. Everybody became a therapist. I used to get calls day and night, and everybody thought they were a therapist, and I used to get all this advice. And
so it's important to talk to the right people, not just
talk to
anyone.
The right people. Yeah. But I think the reality is, I mean, look at my life now. I have the most fabulous life now. I am so happy, in what's sort of happening to me. I'm 62 years old. I think I've got age dyslexia because I think I'm 26. And the reality is that my journey has only just begun again.
Yeah. So that's brilliant. That's a lovely way to see it, because you can start again no matter what's happened.
Absolutely.
To you. Yeah. Gerard, what are you doing with your life today before we get our final words from Keren as well? How's life today? What are you doing?
Forward. I'm sorry?
What are you doing with your life at the moment?
I'm a management consultant. Okay. I'm moving forward, and of course, the kids. I see the kids every fortnight, and my lady friend and I, we were talking about, the next step in our journey together. Great. Yeah. So I mean, there's always there's always light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah.
Keren, what about your tips for our viewers that maybe thinking,
there's something about step by step, and even though there is light at the end of the tunnel, when you're at one end, you actually can't see it.
True.
So it's really about actually, what do I need to do now that will make me feel better? And I think it's also was interesting when you talked about compartmentalising, which I think men do generally better than women. But it's actually about giving yourself time off. When you're in this state, all you do is think about it constantly. It goes round and round and round and round. And actually about saying, I'm going to have, an hour off where I'm actually going to do something that is for me, that I actually enjoy doing, and do something different. Because one of the things also when you're divorced and divorcing and separating is that everything's connected. So wherever you go, it reminds you of the other person, because they were mutual friends. So it's about, what can I do for myself? Where can I go? What hobby could I take up that was new? Where could I meet new people is really important. And I think you talked about exercise. Just changing the chemicals that are going around in your head is really important. So getting exercise is really important, and toast and chocolate sounds great, but it's also, I'm sure. But
look at me now.
You're still eating it. But it's actually about really being careful about what you do, so that you don't go down the route of, I'll have a drink. And it helps for a minute, but it doesn't help. And really, I think it's about saying, I don't need to do this on my own. I've got friends, and I also can go and find a professional who can really talk to me, because our friends are connected in some ways and they want to make it better for us. A professional wants to be there with us while we make our own journey. So I think getting professional help is really important.
That's great.
And that doesn't mean that you're actually weak because you're getting
help.
No,
but this is the thing. This is what people think, that, if I ask for help, it means I failed, I can't do anything on my own. It's not that. We all go through things, we all go through hard times in life, and there's nothing wrong with asking for help. There's nothing wrong with opening up to someone, because that's the first step to your recovery. But we have run out of time, unfortunately. Thank you so much for sharing your stories, gentlemen. Thank you, Keren, for your advice. And if you are watching now and you say, do you know what, this program has helped me, but I would like some more advice, I would like to talk to someone, please do visit the website chrissybshow.tv. The information about our guests will be up on there. And also you can email me on chris@chrissybshow.tv, and I'll promise to answer every single email personally. So I do hope this show has benefited you tonight, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye for now.